Correct.
And so once they came into the same home, and then she, then she shows that she's pregnant, nobody would have been any the wiser.
Correct.
And
Now,
once people started trying to calculate dates.
well, yeah, that's what one of the commentators speculates, and it's pure speculation, but it wouldn't be uncommon for this kind of society to know too much, if that's possible. It's a small town. Everybody knows everybody else. Everybody knows everybody else's business, and so the concept or the thought is that things were not going to be uneventful over the course of their life together, conceivably. And the whole issue, one of the commentators brought up the fact that adultery, fornication, according to Deuteronomy 22, was grounds for being a capital crime, which made it grounds for being executed for what has taken place here. And so the point is that Joseph came down on the side of mercy rather than justice. He was merciful towards his new bride rather than insisting on being hard-nosed and hard-hearted and carrying out what could have been considered justice under their system of law with the law of Moses. And so I thought that was an interesting concept, and this fellow in the commentary suggested that was a way to start out the creation of the ministry of the Messiah, even though he wasn't yet born. But the ministry of the Messiah was going to consist of mercy more than seeking justice. And so maybe it was getting off to a good start before he was even brought into the world. There's one occasion that I can remember where the scribes and the Pharisees criticized Jesus for not having a birth record of a human birth. There's no human birth record of Jesus being brought into the world. That is, there's no earthly father, and so they made an issue of that, stating that they were not born of fornication, and implying that Jesus was. And so that was used against him, and conceivably it may have been used against Joseph and Mary as well. Here's a question for you. Which was supernatural? Jesus' birth or his conception? The conception. The conception was supernatural. And so the term virgin birth that some of our friends in the denominational world use is a misnomer. It wasn't a virgin birth. It was a natural act, a natural birth. The conception was unnaturally a miracle. And so there is a distinction there, and maybe it's worth mentioning. Maybe it's not. I don't know. And so, in verse 25, they did not consummate their union as husband and wife until after Jesus was born. And that was obviously that was their choice, and that was the right thing they felt for them to do. And so, in the judgmental, somewhat ignorant community they were a part of, they could have given into their society. They could have done things differently if they had yielded to what was considered to be public pressure. Joseph was a righteous man, a servant of God, and followed the angel's instructions. Anything else down through? Molly and then Larry.
Yeah, going back to the whole social ramifications, I think it's very telling that when Mary gets this news, her song in Luke doesn't express any worry or fear about how she's going to be viewed.
Right.
It's joyous acceptance
Mm-hmm.
of her role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important mindset as well as shows that she's a righteous woman too.
Mhm.
It's not just Joseph who's
Oh, no.
obedient and appropriate.
That's correct. Yeah, good point. Larry?
I was gonna just say that, I think this section of scripture does a good job of debunking the notion of consummating marriage.
Uh-huh.
That it's in the minds of a lot of people that, until you've come together, in a sexual way, your marriage isn't really a marriage, and yet these words tell us Joseph took her as his wife
Yes.
and kept her a virgin, for, maybe 6 to 7 or 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they were still husband and wife.
Yes.
That concept that sometimes is prevalent in our society today. Oh, we never were together sexually, we were never married, we just get an annulment.
Mhm.
That doesn't really hold water.
Right. Sure, good point. All right. We are just starting in Matthew chapter 2. And so we'll read verses 1 through 6 and get started with the Magi. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Gathering together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what has been written by the prophet," another prophet, this time it's Micah. "And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah, for out of you shall come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." And this idea of a ruler is not just someone who governs, but this is the meaning of the term ruler is someone who will be worshipped. This is a significant event happening in their current history, in their immediate history. And so it's got people curious, it's got people concerned, and this guy Herod he's a strange dude. He really is a weird guy. He has insanity, he has paranoia to the point of insanity. He's just nearly completely out of his mind, out of fear of someone coming in and taking his place in the Roman hierarchy. He's murdered a wife. He's murdered a brother-in-law. He's murdered 3 sons, all to keep the ability to rule in his own right, in his own existence. So this guy's not a good guy. This is not somebody that you want to get on the wrong side of. Now, why Jerusalem is shook up is because Herod is shook up, is the thought. Herod's saying, "What is this?" And interesting that Herod asks, we'll see this in a little bit later, that, in verse 4, the question that the Magi asked the people in Jerusalem, and it's thought that they went to Jerusalem. It's not like the Star of the East provided by God showed a street address where to find this new king. And so they stopped supposedly in Jerusalem to find out where this baby has been born, where he lives. They're asking, where is the king of the Jews? Herod's question is different. He inquires of them where the Messiah was to be born. So there's a difference there. He wants to know where the Christ is. Being partially Jewish himself, he would have some education, presumably, about the coming of someone known as the Messiah. And so that's the heart of his question. That's really what's got him all fired up. And so, but because he's concerned about it, the inhabitants of the area in and around Jerusalem are concerned about that as well. Here's a question for you. Who were the Magi, and what did their appearance signify? Who were these guys? And we believe that there were 3 of them. And where were they from? Another question. They're from the east, which many people believe is probably Persia, out of Persia. But what are they besides Persian? Gentiles. They're Gentiles. So, what does that signify? In other words, weren't there Magi in and around Judah? Couldn't God have appointed the Magi to come from within his own people to go find and look out and worship this new Messiah? Well, yes. Certainly God had that power. He had that right. But he chooses to make this known to wise men from the east, and they travel from presumably Persia to Jerusalem in Judah to pay homage to this new king. The significance is thought to be that from the get-go, from before the ministry of Jesus, the Gentiles are going to be included in this new kingdom known as the church. And that's pretty significant. Especially if you were a Jewish person living at that point in time in history when this was happening. Because up until now, what? Did the typical Jewish person have any use for an average Gentile? No. Yes, Larry?
It seems like, the Jews have been around for quite a while.
Right.
And many Gentiles have acknowledged the mighty deeds of God in their nation.
Yes.
And so these men who are wise men, it appears to me that they have an understanding, a rudimentary understanding of God. And
Yes.
some of the promises that he has made. It's not like they would have never had access to any type of the Old Testament scriptures. And so
Right.
it seems to me that God is doing this with a purpose.
Yes. Yes.
Wise men know about the coming of a Messiah, and they have been motivated or moved or something to come and find out what's going on.
Yeah. And it would make sense that this was revealed to them for just some of the things that you pointed out. Steve?
Daniel, who was one of the primary prophets for the Messiah, was leader of the Magi in Persia. And so likely there was a tradition handed down among the Magi looking for something like this. And then also, it's just kind of interesting that they were looking at the stars, because in Genesis, what it says is the stars and the planets are for signs and for times and like, so there is a logic in there that
Yes.
they identified through that God put into the stars. So
Yes.
it's just kind of interesting to see all that come together, and it is, I think it does link back to Daniel's prophecy, which they probably have access to more than we have access to. So.
Very possible. And in addition to what's been said here, Paul, in the Roman letter, chapter 1, about verse 22, 23, somewhere in there, says that the heathens, not knowing about the God of heaven, know that there is a God. How and why do they know that? They look at the things around them, and the very creation testifies to people who are willing to pay attention that there's a greater force out there that's created everything, and they did not know or recognize Jehovah necessarily, but they knew there was something else that caused these evidences to be brought into existence. And so even the people without law, he says, become a law really of their own through their understanding of a greater force out there. Yes, Becky?
And I think so far, we've really seen the sovereignty of God, and that's what's really important for us to recognize, is that God's will and purpose will be accomplished. He's sovereign in the birth of Jesus, he was sovereign, and he's sovereign in this, in orchestrating the lives of men coming to find Jesus. And,
Yes.
and all of the ways this is happening, God is in control.
Right.
That's important for us to recognize.
Yes. In addition to that, it's important to remember that just because God initiated all of this and his plans were carried through as he said they would be, doesn't mean that the brethren, the children of God, have it all that easily. Right? What it means is that God's purpose is going to be fulfilled. It's not going to be thwarted by the forces of Satan. But it also means the other side of that same coin is that the people of God will, at various times in their lives, pay a price for their faith. Yes?
Well, and also, it's going to be fulfilled in people who desire to please him.
That's correct.
And that's what we have, people that desire to please him in order to not help, but to fulfill.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly right. Anybody else down through wherever we got? First part of chapter 2. All right. The blessing, I believe, is the fulfillment to Abraham that all the nations of the earth would be blessed through his seed. We're seeing this carried out, or they were seeing this carried out in real time in their lives. That however many thousands of years Abraham was given before Christ, was given this prophecy, maybe 2,200 years before this. It's coming true. It's being fulfilled, and that all the nations of the world would become his descendants in a spiritual context, and maybe it's appropriate, maybe it's only fair that the Gentiles would announce this to the world. I don't know. That's just a tiny little thought that I had. So Jerusalem is troubled. Herod, the maniac, is troubled, and we get on. Oh, I know what I wanted to look at. Go with me to Psalms 2, the second Psalm, and I think something else that we could very well tie in with this, I think, and have it be scripturally accurate, is what the psalmist says very early in the writings of Psalms, if they're in a chronological order. Excuse me. Talking about Herod being unsettled specifically. Why are the nations in an uproar, and the peoples devising a vain thing? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us tear their fetters apart and cast away their cords away from us. Look at God's reaction in verse 4. He who sits in the heavens laughs. He laughs at the futility of man. The Lord scoffs at them. Then he will speak to them in his anger and terrify them in his fury, saying, but as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. And so it's just more evidence, more awareness perhaps, that in spite of what man tries to do to stop the progress of the gospel, to stop the growth of the church, God's will is being done. While the worldly people, people of the world, people of Satan, try to do the exact opposite. Herod asked about the Messiah, Christ, and that's a whole different question. Okay, back to our text. And oh yes, go ahead.
Do you think that sometimes we confuse this narrative with the shepherds who come when Jesus is actually born? And when I say we, I don't necessarily mean us here, but I think the world in general, it seems to be sometimes they associate this story, this narrative, with the same narrative of the shepherds who come and bring gifts to Jesus.
I think it's possible that we would do that we could do that. There were two different purposes involved, though, right?
And obviously, if we read this carefully, we'll see there's possibly a couple of years of time difference.
Right. I think so. Yeah, and I don't know that it makes it clear when the shepherds brought their gifts. I think we have a tendency to kind of lump it all together like within the first 6 months to a year, and that's not necessarily the case, as you're saying. But different purposes weren't there. I assume that this is some kind of chronological order with the Magi showing up first. I could be wrong about that, but and then the shepherds come later. But it's not just one event after another in a relatively short period of time, as far as I can tell. Anything else down through chapter 2, verse 6? Then in verse 7, Herod secretly called the Magi and determined from them the exact time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and when you have found him, report to me so that I too may come and worship him." So Herod, part Jew, part Gentile, crazy out of his mind with paranoia, wants to go worship the new king. Great. Fantastic idea. And of course, he had no intention of going to worship the king. What was he going to go try to do? He was going to put him to death, wasn't he? You eliminate, of course, he knows nothing about God, in my view. If he had succeeded, or if Jesus had somehow died or whatever, would that have stopped God's plan? No. At one point, it's stated that God can raise up from these stones children to worship him. So they don't know who they're dealing with. They don't know the power, and as has been stated, the authority of God, which is not anything new to us, I suppose, but it's interesting to have it reiterated a time or two. So anyway, Herod wants to worship, claims he wants to worship the baby. After hearing the king, they went their way, and the star, which they had seen in the east, went on before them until it came and stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. After coming into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell to the ground and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way. So once again, we see God's protection, God making sure that God the Son is going to survive this and be able to accomplish what God the Father's will is. Your thoughts, the comments down through verse 12, anything come to mind? Were the Magi at risk, do you suppose? Simple question. By by turning around and not doing what Herod wanted them to do in terms of coming back to tell him where to locate the child? Yeah. Yeah. That's why they got out of town and went a different way, different direction. So again, we see the power of God and working providentially in this case to accomplish His will, and that is significant. Now, when they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search the child to destroy him." So once again, the miraculous power in this case of God providing protection for God the Son and his parents. So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother while it was still night and left for Egypt. He remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son," and that's Hosea chapter 11. But when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became very enraged and sent and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its vicinity, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the Magi. Then what had been spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be comforted because they were no more. Yes.
I'm really confused about the whole death of Herod, because the timelines that I have and the things I've seen say that Herod the Great died between 4 and 1 BC.
Between 4 and 1 BC. Okay.
So, obviously, this hurts my brain.
So if he had died, how could he be doing all of this stuff?
Bingo, and how could it have been gotten so wrong about his, apparently the death of the date of his death?
Yes. And the answer is, I don't know. I haven't got a clue. I will say this, that scholars have differed over the actual number of years involved. I mean, we all know that, and it's hard to get a consensus of any more than 2 or 3, I guess, to agree on the same time frame. And so, I just don't have an answer for that, Molly. Yeah. Steve and then Larry.
So Jesus, 0 was not the year of Jesus' birth. I don't even know if there is a 0 year. But that wasn't the date of Jesus' birth. That's just the Gregorian calendar.
Okay.
Set it there.
Okay.
In John 2, I believe, Jesus said, "I'm going to tear down this good temple and rebuild it in 3 days."
Right?
And they said, "This temple's been being built for 46 years."
Yes.
Well, it's pretty well historically documented that Herod started building it in 19 BC. So that would make 26 around the first year of Jesus' ministry.
Okay.
And so that, and then you say, okay, if Jesus was born in 6, he would be about 30 in 26.
Right.
And that timeline would then, put him dying around 30 AD. And so, you just have to adjust those numbers a little bit. If Herod died in 2, or, 4 is the general consensus, 2 is another possibility, but then if he's born in 6, he's 2 years old, he's in Egypt for 2 years before Herod died, and that puts him, that timeline would match for 30.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Someone who knows more than I do. Molly? Larry?
I was just going to say that we had a study that Steve presented about the timeline, and that when you took those things into consideration, it made much more sense chronologically.
Yes, exactly right.
So what Steve said.
Yes, what Steve said. Very good. Anyone else? All right.
Well, I did have something.
Go ahead.
So, I guess what this is saying to me is, because Herod said, I want all the babies 2 years and under killed, that the time frame that the Magi gave had to have put Jesus closer to the 2-year-old mark than being an infant.
I would say so, yes.
So when we look at the account in Luke about the shepherds coming to visit Jesus right after he was born, that happened within hours, if not a day or so, because he's still in the manger, still wrapped in his swaddling clothes. It makes it sound like
Oh, okay.
that happened very, very quickly.
Sure.
And it doesn't talk anything about them bringing the ones kids. So when we look at what's happening today in our culture, you know, we see the scenes and it's, you know, 3 guys bringing gifts and stuff.
Mhm.
Those 2 stories just don't seem to be in the same time.
Right, right. We 3 kings of Orient are. Yeah. I remember the song. In any event, anything else? We'll move forward. So they're in Egypt. Then when Herod saw that he'd been tricked, we read that. And then Jeremiah 31 is quoted as being fulfilled. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, Get up, take the child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Then, after being warned by God in a dream, he left for the regions of Galilee, and came and lived in a city called Nazareth. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene. And that is taken out of the prophets, but I can't tell which one it is on the footnote. So that's what got them into Galilee, north of Jerusalem. And this is where some of the confusion came in, I think, with the scribes and the Pharisees. That they had an issue with the prophecies. And they would argue, and on one occasion, they said, look at the prophets. Nothing is said about the Messiah coming out of Galilee. You know, it says he's coming out of the city of David. Steve?
It's kind of an interesting thing, because there's actually not going to be a prophet reference for he will be called a Nazarene.
Uh-huh.
Because Nazarene essentially means branch.
Okay.
So all the prophecies talk about a branch from the root of David and that sort of a thing.
Right.
And so Nazarene isn't the name of the city. It's going to be called a branch. And so coming from Nazarene, you would have adopted that particular name. Just kind of an interesting side note.
The branch.
In that same region of Nazareth, that's where Jonah came from.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
you know, when they say search the prophets, see that no prophet ever arises out of Nazareth.
Right.
They actually are missing it, because that's actually the same place Jonah came from, like maybe within a mile or 2.
Yes. Interesting. One other thing about Herod that I just remembered is when he took over the office that he had, at the time that he was sworn in or whatever, he had every member of the Sanhedrin executed, put to death. 72 deaths. So, presumably so he could have a clean slate as far as the Supreme Court of the land was concerned. It'd be like someone in our society saying, well, you know, we've needed to get rid of the Supreme Court here for a long time. Let's just execute them all. And in Herod's time, that was a reality. Someone did say at some point in time, in any revolution, the first thing you want to do is take out all the attorneys. So I don't know if that originated with Herod or not, but kind of makes you wonder. Okay, so anything else down through chapter 2? Are we leaving anything out? Should we delve into this any more deeply, or are we good with where we are? Yes.
I
Steve.
think it's interesting that, we don't often think of it this way, but Joseph was a prophet. The Lord appeared to him many times in a vision and kind of directed him. And so it's kind of interesting that, they'll say, oh, there's no prophets in Israel still. But Joseph was a prophet.
Yes.
He had multiple visions that directed him how to proceed.
Sure.
With his family. So
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting side note. And then you see also Hannah, I believe her name was Hannah, or Hannah.
In the
In the
temple?
Simeon
Yes.
was a prophet, and so there was prophets in this time period.
Yes. And you don't know if that, on the part of Jesus' enemies, you don't know if that was just a matter of willful ignorance, or if they just refused to pay attention to the prophecies. I think personally, I think that we're just about as smart in the scriptures as we choose to be. I think if we want to learn a great deal, all that we could possibly learn about God and about the Christ, it's all right here. And I think that we'll learn just about as much as we choose to learn over time, over a lifetime. And in some cases that's significant, depending on the individual. Other times it's not. The writer of Hebrews says, by this time you ought to be teachers of the Word. And he says, but because you obviously are not there yet, you have to go back to the basics, back to the beginning, and be fed on the milk of the Word, so you can be able to digest the meatier matters of the gospel. Anything else that you might have in mind? We'll close with a prayer and then take an intermission before worship. Our God, our Father in heaven, we're thankful to you for the time that we've had to look at these things from your holy word, which remind us of Jesus and who he was when he was here on this earth, in this life. We're thankful, Lord, for the truth, the power of the gospel that it has to transform us from persons that had been living in the world as worldly individuals into the grace and mercy and light of the Christ, who is our Savior and our Redeemer and our great King. Watch over us in our worship service, Lord, that we would be doing things in keeping with your will. Bless us continually in this place as we strive to comply with what we've learned in the Scriptures. This is our prayer. This is our offering. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen.